Making headlines for this week of February 27th. A waning honeymoon. Government of Greece may be in a difficult position, but a good outcome still possible. U.S.-Israel jousting. Each country attempting to knock the other's leader off his horse ahead of Israeli visit to U.S. No tax, please, we're British. UK celebrity couple seeking to create movement of tax avoidance in wake of HSBC scandal. And flotation detachment, sensory deprivation for stress elimination, and possibly even a life-altering experience.
With news around, upon, within, and beyond our planet, the program making disclosure official. This is Cosmic Vision News. Here is Jeffrey West.
Greetings and blessings to all. The honeymoon for the Syriza party may be starting to come to an end. This, however, may depend upon how things unfold from this point, as there may be a different strategy contributing to the dynamic. One source, an article at one English-language news website in Greece, tovima.gr, is trying to paint the honeymoon as over. According to this article, Syriza had been adequately warned from all sides, political, financial, and journalists, that its reign would not be pure. Many had told leader Mr. Tsipras and the government party's officers that our partners will be aggressive. They will demand the implementation of the agreements, insist upon maintaining fiscal targets, and are not prepared to offer any help with receiving guarantees that the reform program will be closely observed. The truth is that Syriza's leadership group heard the warnings, but naively, according to some, believed that a democratic Europe would offer a newly elected government the time and opportunity to implement its program, or at least part of its alternative policies that it proclaimed in its election campaign. However, reality has turned out to be cruel, and the landing for the newly elected Prime Minister and his government was bumpy. Bumpy, however, does not necessarily mean out of the game. As reported last week, the Greek government has at least been given 4 months to put its strategies together, although having asked for 6 months, they had to settle with the conditions imposed by the European finance ministers. According to a BBC article on February 24th, Greece has unveiled an outline summary of reforms demanded by Eurozone leaders in order to secure a bailout extension. The measures include plans to combat tax evasion and tackling fuel and tobacco smuggling. Government officials said they were releasing the summary before formally submitting it to guard against leaks to the press. The list must be approved by international creditors on Tuesday to secure a 4-month loan extension. Greece had previously delayed presenting the reforms by 24 hours after initially agreeing to deliver its proposals to creditors on Monday. Analysts say the deal's collapse would revive fears Greece will exit the euro. The summary released on Monday evening contains measures that had been widely anticipated. It outlined proposals to trim the civil service and combat corruption. In addition, it included a commitment to address what Syriza has called Greece's humanitarian crisis. The BBC article continues, adding that the far-left party has vowed to spend nearly 60 million euros on free electricity for the poor and more than 750 million euros on a program of meal subsidies. Such policies are aimed at fulfilling pre-election pledges to help those hit by years of economic crisis. The main points of the summary of the proposals include creating a fairer tax system, combating tax evasion, tackling corruption, targeting fuel and tobacco smugglers, implementing labor reforms on collective contracts and bargaining agreements, and tackling Greece's humanitarian crisis with housing guarantees and free medical care for the uninsured, unemployed. This, apparently, at least for the Germans, may have been enough. According to Patrick Donahue and Brian Parkin of the Greek English news website ekatemirini.com, on February 27th, they wrote, that German lawmakers approved an extension of Greece's loan program after Chancellor Angela Merkel, her coalition, staved off dissent from bailout-weary members in its own ranks. With Merkel's government holding a majority of almost 4/5 and opposition lawmakers adding their votes, 542 voted to approve the measure, while 32 voted against and 13 abstained. It's not about new billions for Greece. It's not about any change in the program, said Finance Minister Wolfgang Schäuble, and in his address to the lower house of parliament, or the Bundestag, in Berlin. It's about offering more time to allow this program to be completed successfully. RT.com, in an interview with German political analyst William Engdahl, this is what he observed.
William, very good evening to you. Thanks for being on the line from Frankfurt. Now, Angela Merkel is expected to win, isn't she, tonight's vote? But there are reports of a growing rebellion within her coalition, with more and more calls that Greece will be better off on its own, as I just mentioned. Why then are such expensive efforts being made to keep Athens in the euro? Over to you.
Well, I don't think the effort is to keep Athens in the euro. The effort is to buy time until after the French elections, end of April, early May, for president, so that the thing doesn't blow up before those elections. And sometime later in the year, perhaps as early as June, July, maybe later in the autumn, it's expected that Greece is going to leave the eurozone. And well, I just want to say, my analysis of the terms that Germany imposed, insisted on for the Greek second bailout of 130 billion were so stringent that it was pre-planned to force Greece out. Not saying so openly, but now you even have German ministers calling for that. So I think that's the clear strategy: get the weakest link out of the eurozone.
We've talked at length about this for many, many months. But William, are you more certain tonight than that Greece will be saying goodbye to the euro and the eurozone?
I don't see there's any way that Greece can sustain the conditions that the IMF and the EU have imposed for taking the conditional 130 and doing the debt, bringing the debt to GDP down to 120.5% by 2020. It's just not sustainable. The austerity cuts on government workers, the layoffs, the cuts of pensions, the lowering of the economic growth rate to, well, it's now -7 in 2011. These terms will bring it down to a double-digit minus, and that's just not sustainable.
Angela Merkel said that Greece's exit would contribute to a potential failure of the euro, and as it happens, the EU itself would be doomed. Do you agree with that?
Well, I think she's playing politics with this. I think privately she knows very well that Greece has got to be pushed out. Ironically, the terms that the German government is imposing on Greece as conditions for the 130 billion echo the terms imposed by the British and French victors at Versailles in World War I on Germany for the savage reparations that were demanded, and that many think led to the rise of the Hitler movement in the 20s and 30s.
Greece has been surviving on the previous bailout for over 18 months now without showing any signs of improvement. There's no guarantee it won't need another bailout, as we've been mentioning, in the next few years either. Isn't Germany and the rest of the EU throwing good money after bad? It's an obvious question. We keep asking it, but the money still keeps being thrown.
Well, I think this is the last throw of the dice, if you will, and I don't think there is going to be any more money after this. Merkel is riding high in the German popularity charts precisely because she's profiled her government as being tough as nails on the Greeks and punishing them for their past excesses, and that plays well in German domestic politics. But after this last round, as I say, I think the Greek exit from the Eurozone is preordained in this, and Merkel wanted that.
But if this round does go through, as we think it will, that's going to be more cuts for Greece, yet more austerity cuts, and that's not going to go down well. We've seen the trouble so far. What is going to happen in Greece?
Well, if they do stay in the Eurozone and do accept these austerity cuts and so forth, it'll be an economic catastrophe. Greece is already in an economic depression, however you want to define the D word. And the additional austerity on top of that is going to create economic situation inside Greece where there's no way that the numbers will add up by 2020 to bring debt down to 120% of GDP. So it's just absurd to imagine that Greece is going to stay in the euro. The loss of Greece to the eurozone at this point would not be a dramatic event for financial markets. It's already been largely pre-discounted. Moody's rating agency doesn't believe this thing is going to stick, and all serious money is betting that Greece will exit, and in the end that would leave the remaining eurozone countries somewhat more stable than they are right now with Greece in.
As CVN has put forth over the last few weeks, there are several dynamics that are playing out simultaneously in an attempt to put the best moves forward at this time. We have several elections coming up in Israel, in France, and also in the UK. Germany and France appear to have entered into a very cozy relationship, one that seems to be taking them further from their alliance with the US and NATO and closer towards an alliance with Russia and BRICS. Germany, therefore, needs to be mindful of helping maintain the current leadership with France, and thus the agreement voted on could be a way of preserving the status quo for a period of time to allow the security of the other pieces to fall into place. Germany does not necessarily want to see the EU survive, especially if Germany and France are wanting to go out on their own. Therefore, as Engel noted, there could be the strategy of just biding time until the right moves can be made. This has the potential to benefit Syriza in that Syriza gets a cash injection while the government can use to fulfill some of its promises to help the people, and then later the mandate will be fulfilled when Greece finally leaves the EU. Ekaterini reported also that Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras denied on Friday that his country would have to seek a third international bailout when a 4-month extension to its current program expires. In a televised speech to his cabinet, Tsipras also said the government had requested a reduction in the country's debt, even though the EU IMF creditors insist Greece must meet its obligations in full. Some have bet on a third bailout, on the possibility of a third bailout in June. I'm very sorry, but once again, we will disappoint them. Let them forget a third bailout. The Greek people put an end to bailouts with their vote, he said. Ekaterini reported again on February 27th that, according to a government official, draft legislation foreseeing the reinstatement of former state broadcaster ERT, which was abruptly closed down in June of 2013 by the previous Conservative-led administration, will be submitted in Parliament next Thursday, March 5th. So, this seems to be a sign that the government is committed to using funds to help the people. So things will probably start to get a bit more quiet in Greece now, and things may stabilize a little bit while the government attempts to put its plans into action. Perhaps around late May, there may be more news of what has taken place in the country and whether or not the plans are working as intended. In geopolitical news, the coming week is very likely to see some fireworks in the U.S. capital of Washington as Israeli leader Benjamin Netanyahu makes his planned appearance before the U.S. Congress on March 3rd. Despite declarations to be absent from the speech and despite calls from within Israel to not make the address, the appointment still appears to be going ahead. Yahoo News had reported on February 9th that a source close to Netanyahu's office had said Israeli officials were considering amending the format of the speech to perhaps have the Prime Minister speak in a closed session of Congress or in smaller meetings with lawmakers. Boehner spokesman Michael Steele declined comment on that report. As has been reported previously, the arrangement for Netanyahu to speak before the U.S. Congress was done without diplomatic consultation with the White House or President Obama, which is considered a break of diplomatic protocol. Speaker of the House of Representatives, John Boehner, had indicated that he felt Netanyahu deserved the opportunity to speak before the Congress on the issue of nuclear armaments in Iran and didn't want any complications, so they went around the usual protocols. The speech is also uncharacteristic because the U.S. has generally not allowed foreign leaders to speak when a national election is so close. This could be a sign of last-ditch desperation, as Netanyahu may be aware that a noose is tightening around his neck. In a short email exchange with Gordon Duff of Veterans Today on February 27th, I received the confirmation from Duff that Netanyahu has enemies both in Israel and in the U.S. To emphasize that point, an article on the Veterans Today website on February 21st reports on an article, a full-page advertisement, actually, that was run in the New York Times. For those of you who have attended presentations, you may have been given a short questionnaire about the information you received in that presentation. The advertisement, in the form of a questionnaire, had the name of John Boehner at the top and the date of March 3rd, which is the date of the address. There were 3 questions. Who is our commander-in-chief? With the first option being Obama and the second option being Netanyahu. The ad shows Netanyahu being circled first and then crossed out and Obama chosen second. Question 2 was the Iraq War. And the first option was A, will only fan the flames of the Middle East, according to a quote from Obama in 2002, or B, I guarantee you that it will have enormous positive reverberations on the region, a quote from Netanyahu in 2002. In this, both answers were circled. Question 3, what is the best way to prevent a nuclear-armed Iran? A, a diplomatic agreement, or B, another war, and both answers were circled. The New York Times seems to be making a bold departure from the traditional mainstream media, and this appearance appears to be pushing many into choices and actions that may not have been considered previously. Obama, in turn, as reported last week, apparently agreed to the release of files proving U.S. involvement with Israel in developing nuclear technologies designed to embarrass Netanyahu while exposing Israel's own nuclear capabilities in violation of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which Israel did not sign, even though Iran did, and Iran therefore has an internationally legal nuclear framework. The U.S. leadership appears to no longer be hiding its feeling that the time has come for Netanyahu to leave office. The New York Times also ran an article on February 25th reporting that Secretary of State John Kerry reminded Americans on Wednesday that Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel, before his address to Congress next week, also visited Washington in late 2002 to lobby for the invasion of Iraq. The following is the audio comments made by Kerry at a meeting of the Foreign Affairs and State Department budget broadcast by C-SPAN.
Amend the agreement. And meanwhile, we have the head of another government coming to speak to Congress under circumstances that, in my view, are shameful, but nonetheless, he's coming. And he's not keeping his powder dry. And he is somebody, as the ranking member indicated, with an existential concern about this. And he says, that's going to be a bad agreement. It's so bad, that's why I'm coming to speak to Congress. I've got to go over the heads of the Secretary of State and the President of the United States and plead with Congress and the American public to derail this agreement because it's going to threaten Israel and, frankly, other nations in the region. So he's not keeping his powder dry, Mr. Secretary. He's not keeping his powder dry, and it's awfully hard for us to pretend he is.
And that's something that you and people in Israel and everybody else have to make your judgment about. I'm not going to get dragged into that particular choice or how it came about. I don't think that's helpful. I will say this.
It's his criticism I'm asking you to address.
Well, let me say this. The Prime Minister, as you recall, was profoundly forward-leaning and outspoken about the importance of invading Iraq under George W. Bush, and
we all know what happened with that decision. He was extremely outspoken about how bad the interim agreement was, during which time he called it the deal of the century for Iran, even though it has clearly stopped Iran's program, and more importantly, he has decided it would be good to continue it. So, I talk to him frequently. We work very, very closely together. We are deeply committed, this administration. I think we've done more to help Israel. I have a packet of 25 pages or more of things we've done on behalf of Israel in the course of this administration to stand up for it, stand with it, protect, fight back against unfair initiatives. So we won't take a backseat to anybody in our commitment to the state of Israel, but he may have a judgment that just may not be correct here. And, let's wait and hear what he says. I'm not going to prejudge his statement any more than he should prejudge this agreement. But when we've heard, if appropriate, I'll respond.
The comments to which Kerry was referring were also published in the Times article. The researcher who dug this old footage up must have been a great researcher, or someone must have done a great job documenting footage. These were the comments made by Netanyahu in 2002.
The question you have is this. This is now a question of not of values. Obviously, we'd like to see a regime change, at least I would, in Iran, just as I would like to see in Iraq. The question now is a practical question. What is the best place to proceed? It's not a question of whether Iraq's regime should be taken out, but when should it be taken out? It's not a question of whether you'd like to see a regime change in Iran, but how to achieve it. Iran has something that Iraq doesn't have. Iran has, for example, 250,000 satellite dishes. It has internet use. I once said to the heads of the CIA when I was prime minister that if you want to advance regime change in Iran, you don't have to go through the CIA cloak and dagger stuff. What you want to do is take very large, very strong transponders and just beam Melrose Place and Beverly Hills 2050 and all that into Tehran and into Iran, because that is subversive stuff. They watch it, the young kids watch it, the young people, they want to have the same nice clothes at the same houses and swimming pools and so on. And that is something that is available in internal forces of dissension that are available in Iran, which is paradoxically probably the most open society in that part of the world. It is a lot more open than Iraq, which is probably the most closed society on earth. And therefore you have no ability to foment this kind of dynamic inside Iraq. So the question now is choose. You can be Melrose Place, but it may take a long time. On the other hand, if you take out Saddam's regime, I guarantee that it will have enormous positive reverberations on the region. And I think that people sitting right next door in Iran, young people, and many others will say, the time of such regimes, of such despots, is gone. There is a new age, something new is happening.
And that is speculation on your part, or you have some evidence to that effect?
I was asked the same question in 1986. I had written a book in which I had said that the way to deal with terrorist regimes, the terror was to deal with the terrorist regimes, and the way to deal with the terrorist regimes, among other things, was to apply military force against them.
The way we did in Afghanistan.
The way, for example, I want to answer your question.
I guess I'm running out of time, so I quickly was trying to get to. We've done, I think, what you proposed in Afghanistan, yet I haven't seen that sort of neighborhood effect.
Well, I think there's been an enormous effect. The effect was we were told that there would be a contrary effect. First of all, people said that there would be tens of thousands of people streaming into Afghanistan, zealots who would be outraged by America's action, and this would produce a counter-reaction in the Arab world.
But I think you're not saying that when you take an action like we did in Afghanistan, we're going to see all of the other countries just fold.
No, what we saw is something else. First of all, we saw everybody streaming out of Afghanistan. The second thing we saw is all the Arab countries and many Muslim countries trying to side with America, trying to be okay with America. The application of power is the most important thing in winning the war on terrorism. If I had to say, what are the three principles of winning the war on terror? It's like, what are the three principles of real estate, the three L's, location, location, location? The three principles of winning the war on terror are the three W's, winning, winning, and winning. The more victories you amass, the easier the next victory becomes. The first victory in Afghanistan makes the second victory in Iraq that much easier. The second victory in Iraq will make the third victory that much easier too, but it may change the nature of achieving that victory. It may be possible to have implosions taking place. I don't guarantee it, Mr. Attorney, but I think it makes it more likely, and therefore I think the choice of Iraq is a good choice. It's the right choice.
What is perhaps puzzling about the last part of those statements is that he seems to be making an assumption that there will be a second, a third, and possibly more conflicts, as though he knew in advance that more conflicts would be required to achieve a specific agenda. The Israeli ambassador to the UN, Ron Prosor, seemed to feel that it was all a joke, comparing geopolitics to the recent Academy Awards ceremony.
Last night, Hollywood celebrated the Oscars, and as millions tuned in, I thought of the following. If the Oscars for maintenance of international peace and security were given at the UN, I would not be surprised if these candidates were awarded prizes. In the Best Actor category, for acting like a peace-loving country, while developing nuclear capabilities, denying the Holocaust, and threatening the destruction of another member state, the Oscar goes to Iran. In the category for Best Supporting Actor, for its unrelenting support to the Assad regime in killing hundreds of thousands of civilians, the Oscar goes to Hezbollah. In the category for Best Visual Effects, for making women disappear from public squares, the Oscar goes to, surprise, surprise, Saudi Arabia. No competition. And finally, for rewriting history, the Oscar for Best Editing goes to the Palestinian Authority. But the truth is that the Palestinian Authority already received enough prizes from this institution. Mr. President, Oscar aside, if we want to pursue peace and security in the real world, it's time to bring down the curtain on the theater of the absurd and return to the original values of the UN Charter back to center stage. Thank you, Mr. President.
There is perhaps a bit of comical irony to this, since Hollywood is known for its control and influence by those with a Zionist agenda, and that outcomes for films are arguably decided by political agenda and favor. Thus, the same logic could be applied to Prosor's speech, and those winning the awards that Prosor gave out were planned according to a specific agenda. A Huffington Post article on February 25th on the subject also noted one thing about Kerry. Kerry had commented about Netanyahu's push for the invasion of Iraq in 2002, but what Kerry did not exactly come clean about was that he himself voted in support of that war in Iraq in 2002. More importantly, however, it was a sign of the deepening rift between Netanyahu and the Obama administration. CVN gently reminds listeners to avoid judging any soul at this time too harshly, as we do not yet know the bigger picture that is unfolding. Many who were previously controlled by the global cabal are switching sides. I am not saying that this is the case with Mr. Kerry, but the statements seemed to be a veiled attempt at accountability without directly coming clean as to his own personal support of the Iraq war. There is, however, a deeper story to all of this that I am starting to become more familiar with. In tonight's final words, I will comment on this a little more as an introduction to another story that I hope will follow next week on this deeper story. In financial news this week, other than what has been reported at the beginning of the newscast, things are a bit quieter, it appears. In the fallout of the HSBC scandal that was reported on CVN last week from the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, or ICIJ, it seems at least one British celebrity couple is ready and willing to go rogue in civil disobedience. An article appearing on the BusinessInsider.com website on February 25th by Mark Tran. Tran writes that Greg Wise, the actor married to Oscar winner Emma Thompson, has said that he and his wife will refuse to pay tax until those involved in the HSBC scandal go to prison. Wise spoke of his disgust with HMRC, Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs Service, and the bank after The Guardian and other news organizations published leaked details of 100,000 accounts held by HSBC's Swiss arm, which showed how the bank had helped clients to move cash out of the country. I want to stop paying tax until everyone pays tax, Wise told the Evening Standard. I have actively loved paying tax because I am a profound bleeping socialist, and I believe we are all in it together. But I am disgusted with HMRC. I am disgusted with HSBC, and I'm not paying a penny more until those evil bastards go to prison. Wise is not as well known as his wife. Thompson is known for her appearances in films like Sense and Sensibility, Harry Potter, Men in Black, Love Actually, and numerous others, and she has apparently given her consent to the civil disobedience. According to Wise, M's on board. She agrees. We're going to get a load of us together, a movement. They can't send everyone to prison, but we'll go to prison if necessary. I mean it. It's going to be like 1848 all over again. Tran offers more, writing that HMRC has come under fire in the HSBC scandal because of a failure to carry out a criminal investigation against the bank, which has its headquarters in the UK. While the agency found more than 1,000 tax evaders among the almost 7,000 UK clients of HSBC Switzerland, only one individual has been prosecuted. About £135 million has been recovered in tax, a lower figure than in other European countries. Stuart Gulliver, the head of HSBC, has apologized in writing and again on Monday when he said the bank's bosses were shamed and humbled by the scandal. He has been summoned to appear before a Treasury Select Committee on Wednesday afternoon with the group's chairman after revelations that he had a bank account in Switzerland that was routed through Panama. Lynn Homer, the HMRC chief executive, will also be questioned. For Wise, it has been more about the issue of injustice that has gotten him so upset. Wise was quoted as saying that whether it's someone being hassled in the street to HSBC getting away with this, I'm the least violent man you've ever met, but I will plow into fights in the street to stop someone being set upon. Days afterwards, I'm a mess because I hate violence, but I cannot stand to see injustice. The UK people seem to be starting to wake up, and it seems also that some well-known British-American expats are starting to wake up also. It was reported a while ago on CVN the number of American expatriates that were starting to relinquish their citizenship, their U.S. citizenship, in order to avoid paying taxes. Earlier in February, Robert H. Wood, a contributor to Forbes Business magazine, indicated that the Lord Mayor of London, Boris Johnson, is now renouncing his U.S. citizenship. But the process has not been easy because it means settling all debts over a number of years with the U.S. Internal Revenue Service, or IRS. This is what happens when people start to wake up. This is what can happen when celebrities are willing to use their influence and status to set an example and be willing to stand by it while encouraging others to follow them. Having said this, however, it is understood that not everyone can or should follow this particular course of action. Each individual will have to find a way to serve in ways that are most meaningful to themselves. For some, this could mean finding a way to help one's community become more self-sustaining. For a single parent struggling to get by, simply taking the time, energy, and compassion to awake within the child a sense of greater awareness has the potential to ripple out into the world. Each soul has the potential to contribute on numerous different levels. This has been how the cabal was able to so effectively enslave humanity, by taking control of all the structures, systems, and corporations that have the greatest influence over humans. Where each soul is willing to serve, in whatever capacity one is able to serve, with the greatest amount of passion, courage, and love possible, that is what has the potential to help empower more and more of humanity on so many levels. This is what the new revolution looks like, folks. In general news for the week, President Obama has held firm on the issue of the Keystone XL pipeline, using his presidential power to strike down an attempt by the Republican Congress to challenge his authority. The New York Times article by Michael Shearer and Coral Davenport on February 24th reports that with no fanfare and a 104-word letter to the Senate, Mr. Obama vetoed legislation to authorize construction of a 1,179-mile pipeline that would carry 800,000 barrels of heavy petroleum a day from the oil sands of Alberta to ports and refineries on the Gulf Coast. In exercising the unique power of the Oval Office for only the third time since his election in 2008, Mr. Obama accused lawmakers of seeking to circumvent the administration's approval process for the pipeline by cutting short consideration of issues that could bear on our national interest. By rejecting the legislation, Mr. Obama retains the right to make a final judgment on the pipeline in his own timeline, but he did little to calm the political debate over Keystone, which has become a symbol of the continuing struggle between environmentalists and conservatives. The veto has polarized both sides of the issue. The article continues, adding that the House Speaker, John Boehner, called the President's veto a national embarrassment and accused Mr. Obama of being too close to environmental extremists and too invested in left-fringe politics. Environmentalists quickly hailed the decision, which they said clearly indicated Mr. Obama's intention to reject the pipeline's construction. The White House has said the President will decide whether to follow the pipeline when all of the environmental reviews are completed in the coming weeks. The article notes just how dysfunctional the U.S. system of lawmaking can really be, in that politicians can change the text or add other language within the legislation so that things are tied together to support an agenda. The article added that Senator John Hoeven, Republican of North Dakota who sponsored the Keystone bill, said he would consider adding language requiring construction of the pipeline to other legislation, such as spending bills, to fund federal agencies, which could make a veto far more politically risky for Mr. Obama. However, for now, it is at least a start in supporting our planet, and hopefully a movement will begin sooner rather than later to get other energy sources more readily available to minimize the need for big oil and reduce its influence in political circles. In disclosure-related news for the week, we look to an article being reported by RT indicating that mysterious lights are allegedly being seen on a small dwarf planet within our solar system that has left scientists puzzled. According to the article, astronomers are puzzled by the latest images captured by NASA's Dawn spacecraft. They show that there are two spots on Ceres that are much brighter than the rest of the dwarf planet's rocky and pockmarked terrain. The probe is due to enter Ceres' orbit on March 6th. It has already begun sending back the first photos of the dwarf planet that NASA has snapped since 2004. Back then, pictures from the Hubble telescope showed a white area. Later, photos revealed that the white area is really a bright spot. Now, scientists say there is a second, slightly dimmer yet still noticeably bright spot next to the first, and they don't know what's causing them. Ceres' bright spot can now be seen to have a companion of a lesser brightness, but apparently in the same basin. This may be pointing to a volcano-like origin of the spots, but we will have to wait for better resolution before we can make such geologic interpretations, said Chris Russell, principal investigator of the Dawn mission, based at the University of California at Los Angeles, in a NASA statement. Andreas Nothaus, lead investigator for the framing camera team at the Max Planck Institute for Solar System Research in Göttingen, Germany, was quoted as saying that the brightest spot continues to be too small to resolve with our camera, but despite its size, it is brighter than anything else on Ceres. This is truly unexpected and still a mystery to us. The Dawn probe is set to begin a 16-month study of Ceres, the largest body in our solar system's main asteroid belt, which floats between Mars and Jupiter. The dwarf planet has an average diameter of 590 miles or 950 kilometers. Ceres is a water-heavy object believed to contain a large amount of ice. However, ice would reflect more than 40% of all light hitting it, meaning the current amount of reflection that scientists have measured doesn't add up. The difference may be accounted for by the resolution limit of Dawn's camera at this distance, Taylor reported. He added that salt patches or ice volcanoes or other potential causes of the glowing dots. Ceres falls into the same category of dwarf planets as Pluto. The classification, according to the International Astronomical Union, is for a celestial body that is in orbit around the Sun and has sufficient mass for its self-gravity to overcome rigid body forces so that it assumes a hydrostatic equilibrium shape, but it is not able to clear the neighborhood around its orbit. To be fair, as mentioned above, this may or may not be anything particularly significant. There is, however, another question worth considering, and that is whether NASA may be preparing the world for extraterrestrial contact. Another article on the disclose.tv website on February 23rd referenced the symposium that was held last year by NASA and the U.S. Library of Congress to discuss the ET existence issue. The discussion at that time was apparently around the vast size of our universe, with many galaxies harboring Earth-like planets and moons. It expands exponentially if one considers life beyond purely the human interpretation of life. Although the article is referencing an event which occurred last year, there is perhaps some relevant information worth sharing again at this time. The article notes that there are multiple reasons why the extraterrestrial question continues to gain popularity. People are starting to ask questions about the world around them, utilizing critical thinking and investigation. After thoroughly investigating this topic, your conclusions will be similar to the conclusions of the majority. We are not alone, and we are being visited. The size of the universe. Scientists have estimated that at least 10 billion habitable Earth-sized planets exist in the Milky Way alone, one galaxy out of billions, but it's important to keep an open mind as to what type of conditions and environments some unknown extraterrestrial-like forms could thrive in. They all don't necessarily have to be Earth-like. Another consideration are the whistleblowers. The past few years have seen a surge of whistleblowers that have come out and said some remarkable things. Bradley Manning, or Chelsea Manning, Edward Snowden, and Julian Assange have received the most attention, but the reality is that there are hundreds of whistleblowers who have come forward with verified credentials and backgrounds. Mass surveillance and the security state is not the only thing shocking people around the world. It's the fact that many of these whistleblowers claim that we are not alone in the universe. It wouldn't be so hard to ignore if it wasn't for the backgrounds these people have in their respected fields. Another thing to consider, the evidence of UFOs. Within the past few years, dozens of governments admitted to allocating resources and having programs to study the UFO phenomenon. For instance, in Canada, the RCMP, Transport Canada, and the Department of National Defense recently admitted to tracking UFOs and investigating them. Another option to consider, the mass mainstream media attention. Media outlets of all kinds are covering the topic. Almost every movie that comes out these days has something to do with space or some kind of extraterrestrial intelligence. We've been bombarded with the topic for a while now, so it's not hard to see how it's on the minds of many. The most recent case of mainstream extraterrestrial noise was made when scientists recently spoke to the House Committee on Science, Space, and Technology. Dan Wertheimer of the SETI Research Center at the University of California, Berkeley, recently called for more funding to be allocated to the search for extraterrestrial life, since he is close to 100% certain that we are not alone. Another option, personal experience and video footage. There are millions of people out there claiming to have contact with extraterrestrial beings. This has played a large role in spreading the influence of extraterrestrial interest across the world. All of us seem to be naturally fascinated with the unknown, especially when it comes to space. It seems like human nature. Neuroscience can now explain what happens to our body when we meditate, but it's something we all knew to be beneficial before the science. Is extraterrestrial life similar? Is it something we all feel deep down inside? Something we don't need proof for, even though the proof is there? Until we begin to see all the small things unfolding, it is perhaps harder to see the bigger picture that is also unfolding. Unfortunately, most people need more time to digest all the information that is readily becoming available at this time, and the global cabal is doing its best to keep people as distracted as possible, while also keeping them trapped in their debts, in their fears, and the messages of separation. In tech news for the week, a BBC article posted on February 26th has reported China as taking steps to drop numerous U.S. tech giants from the approved list of companies to do business with. According to the article, Cisco, Apple, McAfee, and Citrix have all been dropped from China's official list of approved products, according to the Reuters news agency. The change means the company's products are no longer on a list used by government departments to equip offices and data centers. Instead of the U.S. tech firms, the approved list now recommends homegrown alternatives, including Huawei and ZTE. The move is seen as a way for China to boost its native tech industry. Router maker Cisco is one of the biggest losers in the purge. In 2012, the high-tech firm had about 60 separate products on the Central Government Procurement Center's list. Now it has none. Analysis by Reuters suggests that the number of foreign firms on the list as a whole has dropped by about a third. Companies making security-related hardware and software seem to have fared the worst. If you happened to be one who was speculating that one of the reasons for this action has something to do with the recent revelations about U.S. spying and also the spying technologies that have been built into computer firmware, then you would be correct. The article adds that the Snowden incident, it's become a real concern, especially for top leaders. Tu Jingquan, Associate Director of the China Institute of the World Trade Organization Studies at Beijing's University of International Business and Economics, told Reuters. In addition, by favoring indigenous firms, China could be seeking to bolster the prospects of its tech sector, he said. The change comes soon after China introduced rules governing tech firms selling products to banks, which in some cases required them to hand over the source code for their products. The challenge here is to try to piece this story into the mosaic of the bigger picture and how it may be connected to other events that may arguably be targeted towards ending the control of the global cabal. Is there perhaps a link between this and the recent port closures that took place on the west coast of the U.S., for example? Is this decision designed to force the next phase of cabal surrender in order to preserve sales of technology equipment to China. A lot of questions could be asked, but it will be in the coming moments of now that reveal exactly what is going on behind the scenes. Over the last 10 to 15 years especially, wind has been looked at as a new source of energy. In some parts of the world, huge turbines were installed with large propeller-type blades to harvest wind in those areas. The problem was that these turbines came with numerous flaws. They are extremely large and take up large areas of land or water. They are not aesthetically pleasing, nor do they blend into the natural environment. They are expensive. They create a disturbance through vibration. They are noisy. They are harmful to birds, and there are probably a few others that I have not mentioned. What's more is that because of all the negatives, people are inclined to give up on this technology and just stay with gasoline and oil. This is probably how it was designed, to make the alternative energy industry appear unattractive and detrimental to the environment so big oil would look better to the ill-informed public. One company that stood to profit from both sides was General Electric. One of the world's biggest corporations, it is a company that has been linked to the cabal of global domination corporations. They looked for ways to promote an image of being environmentally conscious while still drawing on the excessive profits to be had from big oil and environmental destruction. This may be starting to change. Wind harvesting technologies do not have to be the expensive, displeasing, noisy, and damaging units that they have been in the past. Smaller, quieter technologies are coming out to prove the theory that bigger is not necessarily better. More efficient vertical and horizontal turbine technologies are starting to come out, but communities are not yet taking active steps to implement the technologies. While companies embark on energy-saving solutions, structures themselves are now being redesigned to not only save energy but also produce energy. An article by Charlie Cameron on February 25th, posted on the inhabitat.com website, noted that the Eiffel Tower has just unveiled a new sustainable facelift, and perhaps the most striking update to the famous landmark comes in the form of two of the Urban Green Energies, or UGE, vertical axis wind turbines. Installed 400 feet up within the tower's iconic framework, the turbines will provide 10,000 kilowatt hours of green electricity each year. As for the two UGE Vision Air 5 vertical axis turbines, they are pretty much uniquely suited to their unusual new home, which is located above the Eiffel Tower's second floor, some 400 feet up. The height enables optimum performance for the turbines, which can harvest wind from any direction, and the near silence of the mechanisms ensure they don't distract from visitor experience. Additionally, the turbines were given a custom paint job so as to blend in with the tower's frame. This article is not intended to be a promotion of any one company or its products, but merely to emphasize some of the changes that are starting to take place within the mentality of society. At this time, it is unclear whether this company, UGE, is truly in alignment with a higher vision for our planet or is merely cashing in on the movement. Therefore, discernment is always advised. There will be individuals and companies that will switch from serving the global cabal to serving humanity and the planet. The hard part is discerning which ones are truly helping our planet and humanity and which ones are not. CVN is not intending to judge any one company above another, but merely point out that change is in fact happening. The company that made the renovations for the Eiffel Tower, UGE, was written about in a separate article appearing on the cleantechnica.com website from April of last year. That article by Tina Casey writes that the wind turbine company UGE first crossed our radar in 2012 when it teamed up with GE to launch Sanya Sky Pump, the world's first EV charging station powered directly by a wind turbine. Now the company is back with the launch of Vision Air 3, and this was last year, remember, so we are now at Vision Air 5. So this Vision Air 3 was a ramped-up, high-efficiency version of the company's earlier micro-vertical axis wind turbine model. For those of you new to the vertical axis field, the vertical system is far more compact than the now familiar horizontal axis wind turbines dotting the U.S. landscape. That provides for a broad range of opportunities for site selection in close quarters, including the tops of buildings, sports stadiums, and smaller structures. Casey adds that, speaking of the tops of buildings, the technology behind Vision Air 3 and others in the series is focused like a laser on noise reduction in order to accommodate the growing market for on-site renewable energy generation in urban and developed areas. They must be pretty quiet, all right. Among UGE's customers is the hotel chain Hilton, which installed 6 UGE wind turbines right on top of its Fort Lauderdale Beach resort. UGE turbines have also featured prominently at a colossal renewable energy makeover for Lincoln Field, home of the Philadelphia Eagles. As far as installation in cities, suburbs, and developed recreation areas goes, it looks like the market for distributed wind energy generation could be on the verge of breaking wide open, and that has as much to do with aesthetics as with clean power. Compared to solar panels, writes Casey, micro-wind turbines offer an eye-catching addition to a building's profile while underscoring the owner's green credibility. So it's little wonder that more businesses are beginning to decorate their flagship properties with vertical axis micro-wind turbines. A structure in Taiwan is also using architectural creativity combined with technological innovation in creating what is being dubbed a Tower of Power. Inhabitat wrote in a separate article that inspiration for the Taiwan Tower's design came from woven bamboo or bamboo scaffolding. A meshed exterior encases all the programmatic elements. The weaving of the structure creates an intricate pattern and a series of voids that offers views of the city. The gaps between the mesh also provide space to install 600 wind turbines for a total of 6 megawatts. These small vertical axis wind turbines are quiet and sculptural, as opposed to large, noisy turbines. The landmark tower's eddy turbine-studded facade doubles as a power plant that generates energy for the city. Visitors to the landmark tower will enjoy views of the city and cultural events from a building wrapped with renewable energy generating turbines. Many websites are now available online for anyone who is interested in researching more about horizontal axis or vertical axis wind turbines. Now, turbines don't necessarily need to be used above ground or only for wind either, as the city of Portland is apparently demonstrating. An article published on the Inhabitat website by Colin Payne on February 21st reports that Portland residents can now generate green electricity simply by turning on their water taps and flushing their toilets. Fast Company reports that the Oregon City is using a state-of-the-art system to capture energy from water flowing through the city's pipelines. Small turbines installed inside the pipelines are turned by the flowing water, sending energy to a generator and off into the power grid. It's pretty rare to find a new source of energy where there's no environmental impact, Greg Semler told Fast Company. Semler is the chief executive officer of Lucid Energy, the Portland startup behind the new system. But this is inside a pipe, so no fish or endangered species are impacted. That's what's exciting. Of course, there are always questions that need to be asked. It is certainly great that new technologies are coming out, such as this. What would also need to be asked, among other things, is the following. What checks and balances will be put into place to show how the money saved is transferred back to the customers who have been paying for the service? We often hear about these wonderful new devices that will save money, but as our global economy is reflecting, money does not appear to be filtering back down to those who have been paying for the upgrades or the new technologies for years. It's okay to celebrate news of new technologies, but it is important to keep in mind that many technologies have been kept hidden or militarized, and only some of what we think we know has actually started coming out into mainstream awareness. This is why it is important for people to demand action and answers from political representatives so that the pressure builds on those trying to hide the answers, but also empowers those who are ready to stand up to the abuses because the will of the people is now demanding it. Over to health news now. There is an abundance of sources seeking to bring people back to the awareness within through meditation. For many people, this has either come very easily or it is something that has become much easier through focused practice. Yes, like everything, meditation is a focused discipline, and I admit even I am still challenged on many occasions as I try to reach that quiet space where I am no longer my thoughts. For others, even a minor distraction is enough to make the mind shift into something connected to that sound. A car horn, a train whistle, a siren from a train or an emergency vehicle, or an expletive shouted out by a neighbor or someone nearby. Not every discipline will work the same way for everyone, and therefore it is always vital to not blindly accept anyone's suggestion that a discipline that worked for them will automatically work for you. You are wired a bit differently. You are uniquely different, yet equally beautiful, and the life path that you have lived has exposed you to energies, frequencies, and vibrations that may not respond to certain disciplines, at least in the same way. This story is about another option that some people may wish to consider trying if they have not already. If you are one who has tried to meditate but found yourself getting distracted by external sounds too easily, maybe, just maybe, an experience within a sensory deprivation tank may be something to help you kickstart your meditative experience. Research to see if it feels right for you. This edited report comes from ABC News and was found on the soulspottv.com website.
What if we told you that you can have a totally trippy, mind-altering, possibly even life-changing experience, and all you need is water and salt? Fans of this hot new trend are spending time in isolation tanks where they say a dip can help ease your physical problems and maybe even mental ones. Here's ABC's Neil Karlinski.
If life seems more hectic and stressful than ever, you feel like your brain is constantly spinning. Nightline is about to take you on a journey to a strange alternate world on the other side of this hatch.
Here's the big reveal. This is a unique opportunity for stillness and rest and privacy.
31-year-old Sean McCormick is in the sensory deprivation business.
You go one foot in, other foot in, and then you'll pull this over you as you sort of crouch down.
Here at Float Seattle, customers are offered a chance to get away from it all by floating in a closed box filled with 10 inches of water loaded with 1,000 pounds of Epsom salt. There's no light, no sound, no distractions. All you do is float. It can be harder than it looks, and for some people, they enter a state of deep meditation, even hallucinate.
I'm providing a void, sensory deprivation. I'm selling nothing, basically. It's the perfect outlet to unplug. Even turning your phone off for an hour is a big deal for people. And here, it's not only your phone, but you're shutting out the entire world. Come with me and I'll show you.
Sean is no longtime guru or life coach. He's a former radio ad salesman. But he's been meditating since he was 12 and became obsessed with floating when he tried it in a friend's makeshift tank.
My experience was fantastic, and I kept thinking about it.
He says the impact was so deep, he recently changed careers and opened his own business.
You're all set to go.
Thank you.
Have a good float.
Thank you.
Then you'll step in. Your head's going to go this side.
It's long.
Yeah.
It's really long.
I felt like the only way to truly understand was to try it.
This is a really unique opportunity to be away from things.
Never away.
This is it. Your body and your brain have been waiting for this opportunity for true stillness.
I'd already heard that some people freak out at first and leave early, finding it way too claustrophobic. We had rigged my tank with a night vision camera. As I closed that door and settled into warm, extremely buoyant water, I had no idea that my day was about to completely change. The idea of sensory deprivation tanks and floating isn't new. Neuroscientist John Lilly first developed them in the 1950s to study the effects of total isolation on the brain, in his case, sometimes while using drugs. A practice made famous and terrifying by the 1980 science fiction movie Altered States, starring William Hurt as a scientist who regresses to a murderous proto-human while using a tank. But floating has turned up elsewhere, from the recent sci-fi show Fringe to The Simpsons, where even Lisa and Homer took a trip.
How am I supposed to hallucinate with all these swirling colors distracting me?
Meanwhile, inside my strange little world, I see a few flashes of light, not unlike what you might see when you close your eyes. I'm relaxed, but aware that I'm doing a story on all this. My brain wasn't going anywhere strange so far. It turns out scientists first thought the brain would just shut down without incessant input. But what researchers found is just the opposite. It enters a state similar to meditation, but by eliminating gravity through floating, it goes deeper.
There's been quite a few really good studies showing overall reduction in pain, overall improved mood, improved understanding and awareness of their body.
Dr. Robert Schreier is a physical therapist who has studied flotation and offers it to help some of his patients.
I was blown away by how they would come out of the float session not only physically relaxed, but mentally and cognitively relaxed. We do see that people come out of the tanks and most of them are definitely functioning better from an anecdotal standpoint.
For some people, it can be life-changing. Ashley Whitson, a cardiac care nurse, said she quit smoking and drinking after she began floating and seeing things in a whole new light.
There was that immediate impact. I mean, you walked out the door from a float, we're going to light a cigarette, and said no.
Yeah. I couldn't do it. I was very taken aback with this kind of footage. I've hallucinated before. I've had out-of-body experiences, and it's been really insightful. I've learned more about myself in 5 months than I feel like I had my whole life.
That sort of profound reaction is the reason Sean says he sees all sorts of people coming through his door.
Who wants to float? A lot of people who are working day in and day out really hard and need a break. Planning the rest of your life and the rest of the day and what you're going to do and what you're going to get done and what you have to do, that quiets down.
You can't see it in my face, but somewhere around the halfway point of my hour inside, I go somewhere, and it isn't at all like a dream. When the music comes on, signaling the end of my float, I don't want to leave. Not everyone reacts the same, but for me, it may not be altered states, but a trip far, far away from the hustle and bustle of reality and deep inside your own mind. I'm Neil Karlinski for Nightline in Seattle.
Joe Rogan is an American stand-up comedian, actor, martial artist, sports commentator, and podcaster. One of the recurring themes in his work and life is the use and support of entheogens, such as cannabis, psilocybin mushrooms, and DMT, toward the exploration and enhancement of consciousness. He shares his own insights about the sensory deprivation process.
The sensory deprivation chamber has been the most important tool that I've ever used for developing my mind, for thinking, for evolving. The tank is filled with water. The water is heated to the same temperature as your body, and there's 800 pounds of salt in the water. So you just float there and relax, and because the water is the temperature of your body, you don't really feel it after a while. It's like layers of an onion. And when you first start doing the isolation tank, you can only get a couple layers of the onion in, a couple skins loose. You can't really go to the core. It's too hard. It's too hard to completely let go who you are. But as you get better at it, and as you get more and more comfortable with the experience, you get better at actually letting go, really letting go from letting go from the feeling of letting go from that point. Okay, I've let go. No, you haven't. Let go more, and then you become gone. You disappear. And while you're disappearing, this is what happens. You start thinking, I can't believe I'm disappearing. Fuck, then you're back again. You got to start from square one. You got to let go, and you got to let go, and you got to let go, and you got to get to the point where you literally completely relax. And your body, it gives you amazing energy. Your body, the tension release that you have in your body from a couple hours in the tank is incredible. You feel lighter. You feel like more oxygen is in your body. You feel like more vibrant. And it's just because you've somehow or another calmed the tension. The first 20 minutes or so, for me at least, it's like sort of a seminar on my life. It shows me all the different issues in my life that I don't like and that I need to fix, and things that are bothering me, and things about my own behavior that it could have been better, and things where I'm disappointed in myself. And then it'll show me some things where I'm on the right track. This is good. Continue here. Continue doing this. Continue thinking like this. Continue exploring these ideas. But then once it gets me done, it's like, let's clear out all this bullshit in your life. Then let's think about the big picture. And then it goes from that to like this sort of relaxing, position, where my whole body is just settled into the experience, and then it's just pure thought. It's like the mind completely untethered from the body. And then I start contemplating everything. I start contemplating the universe and contemplating, the role of human beings and each individual's actions all accumulating together to one specific event. I start thinking all kinds of crazy shit, but without the body in the way. Even us having this cool conversation here, we're sitting here on the couch, we're looking at each other, we're looking at computers, and there's sounds and noises, and there's a lot of distractions. Just your body is a distraction. And you've got some crazy fucking environment that doesn't exist anywhere else in the world, and it's fairly inexpensive to achieve. If the tank was something where it was a machine and you would have to strap yourself in, and they would take you through a course where you would learn how to get to the center of consciousness where your body and your mind didn't exist, it would be like a ride on Disneyland, and the line would be 7 hours long. But because it's this weird sort of an organic method of doing it, it seems strange, like you're going to get in this big coffin filled with water and you close the lid. And people start coming up with reasons why they don't want to do it. It's so important. Everybody should do the tank. You will learn more about yourself than any other way. And if you have an aversion to drugs, which totally makes sense, if you think that the drugs are dangerous, you get addicted to things, that's true. You can. If you don't trust yourself, you don't like the idea, you can have very introspective psychedelic experiences naturally in the tank. Everybody should be doing it. It's a fucking amazing way to think. I have a concept or something that I'm working on. Two things I'll do. One, I'll sit down, I'll flesh it out, I'll write what I think about things just kind of off the top of my head. And then once I've done that, once I've really kind of explored it, then I get in the tank and I rethink the whole thing. And then when I rethink the whole thing, sometimes in the tank I consider other places, where other points of view. I consider other ways of looking at it where I may not have been as sensitive to another person's opinion coming from another position. And I look at the whole thing almost like outside of myself. There's so much thinking that goes on in that tank. There's so much evolution that goes on in there that it seems like it's almost impossible to do outside of there, because there's no distractions in there, nothing at all. It's just the thought. It's an amazing environment. It really should be taught in schools. All universities should have them. They should have them, and they should make them available to all of their students. It's one of the greatest tools ever for exploring thinking, exploring the way you think, and sort of making an audit of all your own personal thoughts and ideas. And which ones are you hanging on to because of your ego? Which ones are you hanging on to because they're beneficial to you? Which ones are you hanging on to because you hate your dad? And he put these in your head, and so they're stuck in there. And it's so fascinating, man. And so few people do it.
Perhaps this is something that will aid you in your awakening process at this time, and perhaps not. But if nothing else, you may have found a short period of time to totally disconnect from the outside world, however comforting or discomforting that may feel for you. And in this week's final words, we heard earlier in the newscast the comments made by U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry regarding the visit next week by Israeli leader Benjamin Netanyahu, who will be addressing the U.S. Congress. There is a growing rift between the Obama and Netanyahu administrations, as was noted. According to Aaron David Miller, in an article appearing in the London Guardian, if you asked John Kerry and Obama privately who they wanted to see as the next Prime Minister of Israel, it wouldn't be Netanyahu. They prefer the Israeli opposition Labour Party. There's no question about it. This invitation gate, as I'm describing it, has created an opening for them. Netanyahu is coming to sell his version of truth to the U.S. Congress, and with the help of U.S. Republicans, including the Speaker of the House of Representatives, John Boehner, has managed to sidestep diplomatic protocol by not consulting the White House or making any arrangements to meet with President Obama. As has been reported on CVN recently, this has put congressional members, especially the Democratic Party members who have traditionally been supportive of Israel, in a very uncompromising position of having to choose between supporting their president or supporting a visiting foreign dignitary operating on his own agenda and that of the Republican Party. We heard the report of what Netanyahu said back in 2002, and of course, looking back at, as we can now do, nothing of what he has said then has turned out to be true. He has been saying for over 25 years that Iran is a nuclear threat, and even many within Israel appear to have grown weary of his unfounded comments. Next week, he again wants to push a war campaign, and the desperation is rising in the midst of an upcoming Israeli national election where it remains to be seen as to whether or not the people of Israel have also grown weary of a warmongering leader who has killed and justified the killing in the name of his people in the perpetuation of a Zionist agenda. Many are understandably confused about Zionism, Judaism, Semitism, and anti-Semitism. The original name for the people we now call Jews was Hebrews. The energies appear to be starting to come to a head, and it will be necessary to be clear, or at least as clear as possible, on the definitions, so that anything that is said can be interpreted on the same terms by as many as possible. According to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, Zionism is defined simply as being political support for the creation and development of a Jewish homeland in Israel. The Jewish Virtual Library website says that Zionism is a movement founded by Theodor Herzl in 1896, whose goal is the return of Jews to Eretz Yisrael, or Zion, the Jewish synonym for Jerusalem and the land of Israel. What is notable, although perhaps not obvious to most, is the use of the words political support, Jewish homeland, and in Israel in the first definition in the Merriam-Webster context. At first glance, this seems like a very fair and noble act. In treating all humans fairly, one might very easily say that one supports the Jewish people having their own home. The use of the words I just highlighted, however, from the Merriam-Webster definition, however, will allow for misinterpretation. When the term political support is used, this carries the implication that something outside of divine order of things must be undertaken. The political process is governed by commercial law, and therefore rulings are based on corporate interests and not necessarily the highest good for all people. Jewish homeland is what has differentiated the true Torah Jews from the Zionist Jews, because according to Judaism, the true Torah Jews were not to have a homeland, but be at home in whatever land they chose to live. Israel is a state that was created around 1947, and since that time Israel has usurped more and more land from the Palestinians with the support of the U.S. and Western interests, under the claim that they are the rightful God-given heirs to the land. Now you may note that the Jewish Virtual Library says that Zionism was a movement founded in 1896, and yet Israel was developed or established in 1947. That will be spoken about more in the news story coming next week. Evidence is becoming more abundant now, even from some Jewish sources, suggesting that the Jewish homeland that is now known as Israel and was the former land of Palestine is really not the true Jewish homeland. DNA evidence seems to now be validating that Palestinians are the true heirs to that land and that the Israeli Jewish people have more Khazarian-linked DNA, which would place them, surprise, surprise, in the region of Ukraine that is now under dispute. The same thing seems to be playing out in Ukraine as happened in Israel-Palestine. Therefore, Zionism by definition may be meaningful and even honorable in application, however. It became something different, and one could argue that it became synonymous with genocide. This might explain the separation that we are beginning to see between the true Orthodox Jewish people and those who are seeking to create havoc in the world based on an agenda. The term anti-Semitism, according to the Free Dictionary website, has offered the legal definition as being the intense dislike for and prejudice against Jewish people. In a spiritual sense, the most important point is that we are all one, and therefore, in hurting any aspect of life, we are also hurting ourselves. Differences based on race, religion, culture, nationality, or any other have been created by the global cabal to perpetuate this illusion of difference and to keep people from uniting behind the true power that they are. However, to understand what anti-Semitism is, let's look at the term Semite. According to the newadvent.org website, the term Semite is applied to a group of people closely related in language whose habitat is Asia and partly Africa. The expression is derived from the biblical Table of Nations in Genesis chapter 10, in which most of these peoples are recorded as descendants of Noah's son, Sem. Another website defines Semite as being members of any of various ancient and modern peoples originating in southwestern Asia, including the Akkadians, Canaanites, Phoenicians, Hebrews, and Arabs, among others, or more specifically, the peoples descended from Sem, the eldest son of Noah. Therefore, anti-Semitism is one who is an anti-Semite, or one who is an anti-Semite would be one who has a dislike of descendants of the bloodline of Sem. This is where Western leaders influenced by the Zionist agenda are trying to trip up people. And even in Canada, Harper is seeking to pass laws making it a crime to be critical of Israel, for example. How is disliking the Hebrew people any different than disliking any other nation, any other religion, any other language, or any part of nature, for that matter? It has been the historical indoctrination behind this term created by a group of people seeking to fulfill an agenda that has created this historical significance that somehow the suffering that has been experienced by the Hebrew people is somehow greater or more significant than that experienced by indigenous people in North America or anywhere else in the world. I, for example, could say that I do not subscribe to the Zionist agenda based on how I have seen Zionism applied in the world. Do I agree or disagree with the definition on paper, the Merriam-Webster definition, not in its current wording, but I very much support the right for humans, all humans, regardless of differences, to have a place to live. Those subscribing to a Zionist agenda will immediately or may immediately try to say that I am anti-Semitic. To this I would say not at all, but the clarification of definitions would be necessary. Any opposition to Israel is immediately interpreted as anti-Semitic. The puzzling irony, at least, if I use Canada as an example, is that I can be critical of the Canadian leader and I can be critical of the Canada that is a corporate entity existing under commercial rules created without the knowing democratic consent of its people, and yet it becomes a crime in this corporation to be critical of another corporate entity created around 1947 that has been basing its existence on genocide and warmongering. I am not speaking of the general Jewish people here. Let me be very clear. I am speaking of those who are following a particular political agenda that has been based on lies, frauds, and crimes against humanity that have been carried out by a corporate entity and supported by numerous other international corporate entities. If you choose to speak up, know the definitions that you are speaking about so you can adequately defend yourself when you are falsely accused. Perhaps the best way to handle any situation where one is confronted is to merely ask questions for clarification. What definition are you using when you say this term? Put everything back onto the person who is making the accusation. Ask them to define that which they are accusing or defending, which can put them on the spot. They may not even know the real definition, and therefore they may have no understanding of what it is they are attempting to protect or condemn. Be gentle with the accusers and help them to awaken. Invite them to define their understanding, and then perhaps explore through the offering of your own definitions if there is a way to facilitate some kind of understanding where one can help another to expand one's awareness, understanding, and sensitivity. Martin Luther King has been credited with saying, "Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that." There is a much bigger history to this issue that is unfolding in the form of numerous conflicts around the Middle East, such as the establishment of and resistance against the Islamic Caliphate. Next week, in a proper news story, CVN will attempt to explore this deeper story, to link pieces together, including the issue of who is funding the mercenaries and what are the boundaries of their desired conquest. We'll also explore the connection to what is unfolding in Ukraine and the roots of this conflict from the Crimean War and the birth of Zionism. Create a wonderful week until our next moment of now. So that is the unfolding consciousness news around the world this week. Cosmic Vision News is a part of the Enlight Universal group of programs. Links to stories used in this broadcast are published in the show summary on the blog at cosmicvisionnews.com, on the CVN Facebook page, and also on Twitter and LinkedIn. Google Plus as well. Thank you for sharing your time with me. I'm Jeffrey West, reminding you that darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. Until our next moment of now, stay grounded in love, hold the vision of light and peace in your heart, and keep your eyes to the skies. Disclosure is unfolding all around you. Namaste.